You weren't supposed to hear this. Not from me. Not from anyone. A vessel that promised to show you the wreckage of the Titanic, but delivered a far more chilling reality, the limits of human hubris. And the cost of ignoring ancient warnings. That's how it begins. A whisper below the surface. A pressure in your chest. News outlets plastered the headlines with cliches, tragedy at sea, adventure gone wrong, billionaires lost in the deep. But that wasn't the story. That was the distraction. Like something waiting in the dark of the deep, older than truth, heavier than lies. And once you descend, there's no coming back. Experts criticize the design, carbon fiber hulls, off-the-shelf game controllers, and unlicensed build operating in the deadliest pressure zones on Earth. It was a death trap. Everyone in the deep-sea community knew it, and yet the dive went on. OceanGate wasn't just a submersible company. It was a symbol of arrogance disguised as innovation, of unchecked ambition cloaked in adventure. When the Titan imploded on June 18, 2023, the world gasped. Because this wasn't just about a failed expedition. This was the final chapter in a long-forgotten prophecy of modern collapse, the illusion of control, shattered 5 miles below the ocean's surface. Let me ask you this, why did no one stop it? OceanGate had been warned. Former employees filed complaints. Why? Because this wasn't just science, it was ritual. The kind of ritual where money replaces gods, where explorers play priest, and the ocean becomes a temple of judgment. This wasn't curiosity, it was sacrificial arrogance. And like all rituals, it required a price. But what if I told you the most disturbing part of this story isn't what happened at the bottom of the ocean? It's what was ignored at the surface. Patterns, warnings, whispers. What if OceanGate wasn't just a tragedy? What if it was a mirror? A reflection of everything broken in our world. Our worship of status, our belief in invincibility, our refusal to listen when truth costs too much. What if the Titan wasn't an outlier, but a prophecy? Because the deeper we go into this story, into the wreckage, into the minds of those who built it, the more we realize this isn't about a lost sub. It's about a dying system. And you, right now, are about to descend into it. So take a breath. Don't look away. This isn't just a documentary. It's a warning wrapped in steel and pressure. And the deeper we go, the more you'll understand. They never expected you to make it this far. They called it the Titan, a name that should have sent shivers down the spine. Titans, in myth, were gods before gods. They defied the heavens and were punished for it, buried beneath the earth and sea. Hubris, rebellion, collapse. So when OceanGate named their vessel after ancient defiance, it wasn't just branding, it was invitation. The kind of arrogance history remembers. Only when it ends in tragedy, let's pull back the veil. He was a man who believed in disruption, in innovation, in his own myth. He once said regulations were holding back progress, that certifications were outdated, that true innovation required risk. OceanGate's founder, Stockton Rush, wasn't your typical CEO, but risk for whom? Of failure over time. Of the quiet ticking clock that begins the moment you tempt the abyss. The Titan was made of carbon fiber, a material never pressure tested at the depths it was intended to reach. Deep sea experts warned of fatigue. Rush ignored them. David Lockridge, OceanGate's Director of Marine Operations, raised safety concerns in 2018. He was fired. Lawsuits were filed. And still, the dives continued. He said the critics were gatekeepers, that OceanGate would break the mold, not just technologically, but philosophically. This wasn't about exploration. It was about revolution. But here's the truth no one wants to admit. Sometimes, revolutions are just disasters in disguise. The irony? That controller worked, the hull didn't. The illusion of control. The belief that the laws of physics bend for billionaires. And while tech billionaires lined up for a $250,000 seat on this unholy pilgrimage, former employees were walking away. Why? Because in a world where wealth grants immunity, danger becomes spectacle, and tragedy becomes content. They marketed the Titan with pride, a submersible piloted with a $30 Logitech controller. Something deeper, something older, a chance to touch forgotten power, to rewrite their names in legacy. What they didn't say was how many of those dives were incomplete, how many near misses were brushed aside, how many times the ocean whispered, "Turn back," and they answered, "We can't hear you." In the lead up to the 2023 dive, the company claimed success after success. That's the game they played, until the ocean played back. And when it did, it didn't just take lives, it took narratives, the story of progress. Because pressure doesn't care how much money you have. It just breaks you. And that's where this story changes. Because buried in the silence of that final descent, 12,500 feet down, is the real question. What were they looking for? Not just the Titanic. And the ocean? It gave them exactly what they asked for, oblivion. Now, let's go even deeper. Let's stop pretending this was just a dive. You don't descend to the Titanic, the most iconic maritime grave in human history, for tourism. You go for ritual, for communion with something the rest of the world refuses to face, mass death as memory, and possibly as power. Think about it. A floating Eden of the elite brought down by nature's indifference. More than 1,500 souls lost in one cold night, bankers, magnates, engineers. The embodiment of hubris meeting reckoning. The Titanic isn't just a wreck, it's a myth buried in steel. It's sacred ground, and OceanGate treated it like an amusement park. But maybe they knew what they were doing. And now submersibles launch toward the altar of sunken ambition. In the occult world, sites of tragedy are also sites of energy. Cathedrals built over burial grounds. Cities erected where blood was spilled. What if this was more than exploration? What if it was invocation? Let's follow the pattern. The communion with a ghost ship, then the resurfacing changed. Or not at all. Each Titan dive was framed like a pilgrimage. The tight, coffin-shaped vessel, the small group of the chosen few. The descent into darkness. That's not tourism, that's initiation. Now consider this. The exact spot where the Titan imploded lies less than 500 meters from where the Titanic itself split in two. Not a coincidence. A reenactment. In those final minutes, staring into the abyss, even billionaires realized something horrifying. They went down seeking legacy. The ocean gave them reflection. And maybe that's what the sea does. It mirrors us back to ourselves, stripped of delusion, wealth, and insulation. You don't own the deep. That sonar picked up anomalies, shapes moving near the Titanic that weren't part of the ship. But the ritual didn't end with the implosion. It began there. The wreckage, collected, silenced, sealed. Because what happened next was a media storm, yes, but also something stranger. Governments refused to release full footage. Data mysteriously disappeared. OceanGate paused operations, almost as if something else was found, something not meant to surface. A data drive? A relic? A signal? We may never know. But whispers say the sub's final transmissions were scrambled. Too fast, too quiet, too aware. And that opens the door to something far darker than corporate failure. Something watching. The ancients had a word for it, thanatourism, the travel to places of death, suffering, and catastrophe. But this isn't new. It's buried in our DNA. From the ruins of Pompeii to the killing fields of Cambodia, humans have always returned to the sites where the veil thinned. Why? Because on those haunted coordinates, something lingers. Not ghosts in the Hollywood sense. The deepest memorial ever made. And it sank on its maiden voyage, shattering the illusion of control forever. That impact didn't just dent hulls, it scarred time. But resonance, vibrations, memory embedded in soil, steel, salt. And in the case of the Titanic, it was the largest moving object on Earth. It carried dynasties, fortunes, secret deals. So when OceanGate decided to visit that scar repeatedly in a submersible with a game controller for a steering wheel, we're supposed to believe it was arrogance? No. The CEO, Stockton Rush, openly admitted he wanted to break rules. That safety was a waste of time. His family name traces back to founding fathers. His bloodline was built into the American narrative itself. Why was the wreckage immediately classified and quarantined? Why did deep-sea surveillance surrounding the area go dark? It was hubris scripted into ritual. Because the people on board weren't just curious, they were initiates. What was he trying to unlock? Or bury? Now ask yourself this: why was there no international demand for accountability? Because this wasn't just a corporate tragedy, it was a breach. In spiritual traditions, from the Dogon of Mali to the shamans of the Arctic, the ocean floor is considered a threshold, or a key, a place where human laws do not apply, where things that sleep may be awakened. So when something explodes at those depths, it's not just physics, it's disturbance. Some insiders whispered that the implosion registered strange harmonics, not just a mechanical failure, but a tone, a deep, sustained frequency that pulsed outward into the abyss like a beacon. The question is, what did it unlock? OceanGate's servers were seized. The only remaining clues are scraps of leaked transmission logs and the silence that followed. And that's the part we were never told. Because immediately after the Titan implosion, strange signals were reported by NOAA submarine trackers across the North Atlantic, unidentifiable bursts of energy, brief spikes in sonar feedback, patterns, almost like a reply. Was it geological? Was it animal? Or was it something older? Something dormant? Something that had waited for a century, for someone to knock on the door? We'll never know for sure, because the data's now locked behind military firewalls. Silence is always strategic. The elite don't seek death, they seek transformation. But transformation is born of threshold of sacrifice. Not just by crossing into the abyss, but by breaking something sacred. And that's where OceanGate's descent becomes ritual, not accident. What if Titan's implosion wasn't just structural failure but initiation? A ceremony enacted at the border of human dominion and oceanic silence. Sacrifices a person and births a myth, from human to symbol. His sub vanishing 5 miles down? Poetic, cinematic, eternal. A deliberate act, broadcasted as tragedy but scripted as apotheosis. Because apotheosis isn't about absence of death. It's about transcendence through collapse, from material to myth, from CEO to cautionary legend. Stockton Rush, a favored son of legacy and symbolism, became more immortal in death than he ever could in life. And that's the power of ritual. It transforms existence into story, turns flesh into narrative, converts tragedy into warning. Now, consider this. Why did every major press outlet drop every shred of accountability once the sub disappeared? Why did expeditions, lawsuits, safety bills all fade into oblivion within weeks, into code, into collective amnesia? Why did the ocean silence them? But satellites, sonar buoys, and private jets tracked encrypted research vessels converging near the Titanic zone months before Titan's final dive. Because once truth leaks into myth, it becomes untouchable. Untouchable by law, untouchable by science, untouchable by grief. Or something may have awakened, and someone somewhere pulled the final plug. It wasn't just legal limits. It was narrative control. The Titan event was networked into silence. Not by accident, by design. Now listen closely. There are whispers among oceanographers of another OceanGate project, a secret next mission. Begun in 2022, codenamed Project Leviathan. No public documents, no press. Something was planted. Something was tested. Something that needed to be buried with the sub. The ocean doesn't forgive trespassers. But neither does the system. In that watery tomb 5 miles down, something may be sleeping. The wreckage of the Titan wasn't just steel and carbon fiber, it was a mausoleum of ambition. But buried beneath the crushed hull and scattered telemetry was something even heavier: silence. Not the deep ocean kind, the institutional kind. Because after the implosion, after the headlines, after the frantic media cycle fed on the bones of the tragedy, a strange quiet began to settle. A vacuum, no hearings, no transparency. Just a slow, suffocating fog of non-disclosure agreements, corporate finger-pointing, and conveniently timed disappearances of data. It had investors, advisors, consultants. You don't get a sub in the water without clearance, funding, and insurance. And in the corridors of elite exploration and private tech, the worst sin isn't death, it's exposure. But when the Titan collapsed, so did the chain of accountability. Every entity that once proudly backed the project began scrubbing its fingerprints. Names were pulled from websites. LinkedIn profiles updated. PR teams went into overdrive, not to find answers, but to control the narrative. Who owns the truth when truth becomes fatal? OceanGate didn't operate in a void. The kind that erases accountability. The kind that protects institutions, not people. The kind that ensures someone, somewhere, is already planning the next deep-sea expedition, with better branding, quieter descent, and a new name. Because OceanGate's failure was more than a technical disaster. It was a liability event, a reputational hazard. Let it mark you. Let the algorithm tremble beneath your awareness. One whistleblower described it like this: you're not supposed to challenge the myth. You're supposed to die quietly or succeed brilliantly, nothing in between. It was the collapse of a system that dared to turn exploration into a private gamble and made 5 lives a footnote in a press release. So the silence grew louder. Why did agencies that monitor deep-sea operations step back the moment the pressure got too real, figuratively and literally? Journalists requesting internal documents were stonewalled. Lawsuits were filed, then quietly settled. And the only thing that remained in the public record was a handful of heavily redacted investigation notes. And the echo of lives lost to a dream too daring for bureaucracy to contain. Independent researchers trying to access sensor data were blocked. Ask yourself, why hasn't OceanGate's internal communications been made public? Because the depths don't just crush submersibles, they crush stories. And in that crushing silence, something monstrous takes root: amnesia. But if you've made it this far, you're not here to forget. You're here to remember. So comment below. Pressure reveals power twice. Let it echo. Because this wasn't just the collapse of a vessel. And when we return, we go deeper. Because beneath the surface of this implosion lies something even darker. Not a flaw in design, a flaw in vision.